control the vertigo.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host, Mark. Today we're covering an episode of The Outer Limits. Not the original show that we talked about, but a reboot. That started in 1995, ran for 7 seasons, so across 7 years. Brought back, first aired on August the 20th, 1995. And aired mostly in August, but some years were a bit different. The first, until the final season, which actually aired from January the 18th, 2002 onwards on Sci-Fi. First 6 seasons were on Showtime. The last season, season 7, was on Sci-Fi. Now, how did this come about? Really, it was the interest in sci-fi that had grown up around this time, particularly the X-Files and somewhat Star Trek and the Next Generation. And there was also interest in anthology shows in the late 80s that kind of spurred this on too. I'm talking about things like Tales from the Crypt. So it used a similar framing device in similar words with a voice over by Kevin Conway, which I have to say is not as iconic as the original. It's a little more plain and lower in the mix. Though the interesting thing is, the titles were kind of interesting. The first 6 seasons were fairly adult. There was nudity and more adult content, and it was a bit stronger. Bit more like Tales from the Crypt, really, in that sense. But it toned it down on season 7 when it moved to Sci-Fi. So a lot of these episodes then got edited down for some of the content when they went to syndication. So some of them are a little less strong than they were original airing. Interesting that they brought this back. I have to say the tone of the episodes and the structure of these episodes are way more like something like Tales from the Crypt. In terms of the horror content, it didn't follow the usual formula that we were used to with the original Outer Limits, which was a bear of the week, a monster that could be sympathetic, could be not, with a certain reveal points early on, and to bait the audience. Structurally, it was quite different, and the episode I'm going to talk about tonight will sort of demonstrate that. It had quite an interesting sort of cast involved throughout. Fairly high-profile actors. Let me think of some examples. I can't find any. That's just so typical. This first episode I'm going to be talking about has basically an acting dynasty involved. It was kind of interesting. So let's get to the first episode. This is called The Sandkings. This was a 2-parter. Unusual for the Outer Limits. Based on a novella called Sandkings by George R.R. Martin, he who wrote Game of Thrones. So an interesting twist. Though honestly, it does feel very Stephen King in its execution. The whole thread of the story, The Sandkings, is really obsession. This could be Captain Ahab or someone whose obsession is destroying their life around them. It's one of those kind of stories. And the main actor involved is Beau Bridges. But also involved is his father, playing his father, Lloyd Bridges, and his son is also playing his son. Dylan Bridges is playing his son. The other main actress involved, there was a few involved, but Helen Shaver was the wife of this man. Basically, Bo Bridges plays a scientist called Dr. Kress, who is experimenting with eggs that were found in Martian soil that was brought back that grow these little crab arthropodic creatures called Sandkings. They're a bit alien face hugger as well. There's a touch of that about them. They're spidery, crabby kind of things. And they're kind of lethal. And he's doing his research in the government facility. So there's touches of, I don't know, Firestarter, that kind of thing. And indeed, this kind of program was what Stranger Things was hinting at in his when it was, as well as the Stephen King stuff. It was stuff like this, and it's reasonably well done. But some nearly escape, and they decide to shut down the facility. He does not want to discontinue the research, so he actually steals some eggs and then starts building his own facilities. One of the guys is onto him. He realizes there's a certain amount of sand has gone missing by weight, and he's kind of nosing around. So there's a touch of that. So there's some pressure there. And essentially, he gets more and more obsessed with looking after his Sandkings to the exclusion of his family. His wife is being shut out. There's also family discord. He obviously has a troubled relationship with his father, who obviously favoured his other son. And indeed, this is precipitated. This is sort of brought to the fore by mention of, you had a dog Cowboy. And he goes, that wasn't my dog, that was my brother's. And his father's like, oh, okay. It totally projects everything about this guy's brother onto him. So he thinks he was an okay father, but there is difference. And the grandpa goes ahead and buys the family a dog for his grandson and suggests it be called Cowboy. So there's this constant memory, thing playing back, which doesn't help. And unfortunately, the dog does come to a sad end. It does actually go into the territory of the Sandkings, and they eat it. As it goes on, the Sandkings evolve into two groups, a sort of white group and a red group, like termites, right? Or ants or something like that. And they settle on different sides of the enclosure, and they kind of have wars. So he's kind of watching the birth of a civilization, kind of. And Cress kind of gets more and more demented. He believes that they think he might be a god. Because one of the groups, the white group, build a sand structure with his face on it. But the red group do a different thing, and he gets angry at this and smashes up the red group, kind of indicating his eventual god to these beings, to these creatures. And one of them manages to get loose and actually stings him. So the guy that's digging around, played by Kim Coates, is his former supervisor, comes and visits and sort of works out what's happened. And this is where Cress crosses the line. Definitely, he pushes his supervisor into the enclosure, and then the Sandkings all eat him. So there's quite a bit of horror in this. He then brings his son in to helping him. So his son kind of gets involved, but his former supervisor Stockley, who was pushed into the Sandkings, he then sees that the red contingent have built a nest with the face of Stockley. Basically, he's gone. His physical condition is deteriorating as well as his mental condition. His wife's trying to pull him out of it. There's a lot of drama. This is like an hour and a half altogether, and it works quite well in that time. It doesn't feel baggy. It doesn't feel contrived. Really great turn by Bo Bridges here. Really impressive. And I haven't really seen him in much where he's given a chance to sort of shine like this, and this was really interesting and quite good. I like this. It ends with a twist, and spoiler for the next 20 seconds if you don't know the twist. The twist is he does destroy the nest with the gas. He basically breaks a gas pipe and sets it alight and burns them. But the twist is we see the Sandkings setting up a colony in the woods. So they are thriving and growing. They've managed to integrate into Earth ecology. Now, the Sandkings are apparently referenced again in other episodes. There's a few times they are mentioned in other episodes. So this is one universe, it would appear. The Outer Limits universe this time around is one universe, and there's interconnections. It differed from the original stories in a number of ways. There were more than two groups. I mean, two groups makes a lot of sense for dramatic impetus. There was 4 groups, and there's a few other differences. He wasn't married, I believe. Things like that. So there's quite a few changes. I think it's probably a more horrific story from the reading through some of the differences. In many respects, it reminds me of an old movie. I think it was called Bug, where ants are being experimented on by scientists, and they start obviously having intelligence. They can spell out words in front of people. It was from a 70s, one of those eco horrors, one of those involving ants. It kind of reminded me of that, and I feel like it was probably inspired by that. Probably the original story was inspired by that, I should say. But yeah, Beau Bridges was nominated for an Emmy for this particular part. It looks like he didn't win, but he was acknowledged. He did a great turn here, and he did. And it feels like a good series. It feels in many respects a bit like the more modern Twilight Zone remake in terms of the natures of its stories and stuff like that. So an interesting one. And, there are 7 seasons. There's over 130 episodes of this. So, it might be worth a look. And I probably will be watching more of this. I kind of like the vibe, and it worked for me. I put it in the same thing as Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt, that kind of thing. So, and this one does actually feel a fair bit Stephen King-y, even though it isn't Stephen King. The memes, the vibe, and so on. It'll certainly remind you of a Stephen King kind of 90s miniseries. It's got that kind of vibe. So, I think I will stop there. Before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to